Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the first video of a few birthing videos that I'm going to make. Today's video is the preparation and considerations if you are planning to have a water birth at home. I would like to share our experience because we prepared to have a water birth at home, and having now gone through it, I'd also like to share the things that we considered, a bit about our experience, and maybe that would be helpful for anybody else. I know that when we were preparing, there were a lot of question marks that I had, a lot of things that you kind of don't really think about until you need to think about them. So I'm sharing them in the hopes that this is useful for anybody else preparing for their potential home water birth. My sort of usual disclaimer that I'd like to say in these videos: I'm simply sharing my experience, sharing information that I think may or may not be helpful for you. Please take what serves you and leave what doesn't serve you. Please do your own research and your own thinking around what resonates for you, for your birth space, for your home, for your circumstances. I'm purely sharing literally our experience and maybe a few things that I think might be tips, but again, take them as tips if they serve you and leave them if they don't. Right, so let's get into today's topic, which is the preparation and considerations for a water birth. The first thing I wanted to discuss is the consideration of where. And this is not necessarily where to place the bath. This is a conversation we had with another couple in our birth class. Is the best thing for you to use your own bath, as in if you do have a bathtub in your house, or is the best thing for you to rent or buy or in other ways get a birthing pool and then use that, and then where to place that in your house? I loved having this conversation with the other couple because they ended up using their tub that is in their house, where we ended up using a rented birth pool. So the first one I think is to consider the size of your house, if you do have space for a rented birth pool or not, and then the size of your tub as well as the size of your bathroom. For us, we have two bathtubs. They're, I would say, standard bathtub size. Like they would be, you'd be able to give birth in them no problem. But the size element that bothered me is both of ours are against the wall. So the only way for somebody else to be a support figure or to access me is if they were, there's only one side that they can get to. It's not like there's a lot of space around the bathtub, and also our bathrooms do not have a lot of space for a lot of people. So I guess that's also the consideration, is how many people do you have in your birth space that are potentially going to want to be close to you, or that you want to have in the space where you're giving birth. In my case, I made use of the services of a midwife and a doula, and my husband was there. I didn't make use of his services. So for me, having looked at our bathroom sizes, it just felt like that would be so incredibly impractical and so cramped to try have these three people in there. And I'm sure they could have taken turns and we could have made a plan, but it didn't feel very practical. So if I had a bigger bathroom, or if I had one of those freestanding baths, or if our bath had literally maybe one more side for somebody to be able to be in the front of it or the back of it, then maybe I would have just used the tub that we have in our home. The other consideration here is not necessarily how many people are going to be in your birth space, but also the extent to which you are allowing for monitoring during your birth process. So if you have requested that your midwife be hands off, no monitoring whatsoever, then they're unlikely to need to access you. If you've asked your doula or anybody else to be present but not to be hands-on, if you'd like them to step away, then maybe it's fine if your bathroom is the size of ours and your bathtub is the size of ours. This was my first birth. I didn't know how hands-on or how hands-off I wanted to be, and I wanted to have the space in case I wanted a more hands-on approach, and in the moments I wanted to be able to say yes or no to certain monitoring, but I wanted to make sure that the midwife could access that if she wanted to, and that the doula could be in my space, and that my husband could be there as well. Then the other consideration, I think, for your own bathtub, obviously if you don't have space in your home for a birthing pool, then that kind of does make that decision a little bit easier. I know that a lot of midwives might have their preference, and I think I'll have to verify this, but I think on my home birth prep sheet, it did say that there needed to be a certain amount of space around whatever water bathtub you use for your birthing space. However, the other couple that we discussed this with, their midwife was completely fine with them using the bathtub in their house. So if you are using the services of a midwife or a traditional midwife, like a registered one or a traditional one or a doula, also check with them if they might have a specific preference and then brainstorm whether that's going to work for them as well. The next consideration is an obvious one, and that is the cost of it, because I'm guessing most people don't just casually have a birth pool lying around, and I don't think that it's the best idea to birth in like those random kiddie pools. So probably best to get, like, if you're going to get a birth pool, to get like the proper birth pools. But the consideration that I want to chat about now is cost. If you use your bathtub, obviously there's no cost involved in acquiring the tub. But if you're going to use a birth pool, you need to decide whether you're going to buy said birth pool or you're going to rent it. Now I want to talk about something that's also going to go through this whole video. When you're prepping for a home birth, it is preparation for a potential home birth. You know, there's a lot that we do to prepare our space, and I do think that most of that preparation, if not all of it, makes a really big difference to the birthing experience that you have. But there is still a small chance that you may not actually give birth in your birth pool or use your birth pool the way that you think that you will. Now for me, that was a big consideration, is obtaining a birth pool and paying that money for the small chance that maybe I won't get to use said birth pool. And that's where the cost element comes in. If you're trying to cut costs, then maybe you would opt to use your bathtub because that's going to be there irrespective. It's not something that you need to acquire and pay for if you don't end up using it. So then the next consideration that you also need to, I guess, factor in is the practical thing of having a birth pool set up in your home. So I know that some people set it up, and we will discuss this sort of when you've gone into labor and they only then prep it then. But the recommendation to me was to have it already set up from like 38 weeks or so. I didn't set it up from 38 weeks, but just to consider the practicality of having a birth pool in your space and setting it up before the time where obviously your bathtub in your bathroom, you don't have to set it up. It's already there. Okay, and I think that might be all of the considerations for whether to use your bathtub or to rent a birth pool. One of the things I didn't really factor into my thought process, but it could be in yours, is if you are filming your birth or if you're taking photos of your birth, what you would want that to look like, and if you have the space and aesthetics, I guess, in the bathroom that you're birthing in. So like I said, we opted to rent a birth pool, and the main reason for that was the space in our bathroom. I wanted more space. I did actually want a larger tub than what we have in our bathroom for birth, as well as the space around it for the 3 people who I had requested to be in my birth space to be able to access me. That was the main reason. The kind of thing that irritated me, I guess, was paying for a birth pool and then thinking like, what happens if we don't use this birth pool? But water has always been an important thing to me whenever I'm feeling sick, whenever I have any kind of pain or any intense stuff. I love to take a bath, so it was important enough for me that I was willing to incur that cost at the small risk that maybe we weren't going to use it. So the next consideration is whether to rent a pool or to buy a pool. Okay, quick feeding baby break. In our case, we decided to rent a birth pool. The main reason for that was it seemed like an expense I didn't want to incur buying one and then having to store it, having no idea when we're going to need to use that again. So for me, just from the get-go, I looked at renting a birth pool rather than buying a birth pool. Mainly because I didn't want to store it. It's not really an item I want in my house. It's also not an item that I intend to use frequently. We rented ours from Calgary Birth Pools. I could highly recommend it. It worked out really wonderfully, and it came with pretty much everything that we needed. I will discuss that, like what it comes with, what I would recommend that people might consider getting up and above the kit that came with it. But that was a big pro of renting one, is that there's somebody else, there's a company that you're renting it from. Hi. And they have a lot of experience with water births, so they kind of know things to consider that I was really wondering about. Like one of the questions my husband had was, how do we get this water out? And luckily that when you rent it, it's something that they think about, and that comes with the pool. So I guess the main consideration here is just getting just the convenience of renting it, getting everything from a company, and then you do incur the cost of renting it, and you might not use it, and you're still going to incur that cost. Where I guess if you buy it and you don't use it the first time, maybe you can use it for other births. But again, I didn't really want to store it or buy something that I might use in a few years from now. So in terms of the cost element, because that might be a big factor for people deciding to buy or to rent one, is we paid a total of $300. It was $270 to rent the pool, and then it was $30 for them to collect the pool from our house after birth. The renting duration is we picked it up shortly before 37 weeks pregnant, and you could keep it until 42 weeks pregnant, or until I think it's something like 2 days after you give birth. There are terms and conditions in the contract of renting it. For example, if you don't use it by a certain date, like maybe you can get some of your money back if you only paid a deposit, and that would be specific to the company that you use. So I'm not going to share those terms and conditions. In our case, we did use the birth pool in the birthing process, and we did return it afterwards, so we paid the full amount. The decisions that we could make when we rented the birth pool was the company had 3 different types. They had the standard birthing pool, they had a slightly smaller one, and then some other purple one. I don't remember what the purple one was. I wanted the standard one, but I booked it quite late, and they only had the mini one available. But I must say, having got the mini one, I'm very grateful. It's only a little bit smaller than the standard one. I'll leave a link to both of them below so you can do a comparison. But it fit a lot better in our space, and then it takes a lot less water, it takes less time to fill up, and it was definitely more than big enough for what I wanted to use it. The other consideration that we had was whether they deliver it before your birth and pick it up, or whether you want to go pick it up and then drop it off. So in our case, we picked it up before birth during pregnancy, but we figured that because we're honoring the first 40 days and it was very important to us to stay at home after birth and to kind of be in our space with our new baby and everything that we've gone through, is we did pay the extra $30 for them to come fetch it 2 days after. I think that's the main considerations. I think the only tip that I can give here is read the contract properly, be happy with the terms and conditions that you are signing for, and look at the possibility of a deposit and then returning it if you're not going to use it at all. There was definitely something like that in our contract. Like if for whatever reason before I think 38 weeks, you definitely know that you're not going to do a home birth anymore, you're not going to use it, that you don't incur the full expense for that birth pool. And then if the company you're renting it from has various options, in my case, I was definitely happy with the slightly smaller birth pool, and I only took that because that's what was available. But for future births, I think that I would look to actually choose that as my preference. Continuing with the considerations of where, because we've covered where in terms of if it's your bathtub or rented or bought. And now I'd say where in terms of where in your house if you are going to use a birth pool. Our 2 main considerations was upstairs here in our bedroom, which has an ensuite bathroom over there. And that's kind of appealing because, you know, you might want to be on the bed during labor, and a lot of people find comfort in sitting on the toilet during labor. We do have a bathroom downstairs that has a toilet. But yeah, for I guess a few seconds there, we mildly considered our bedroom as the birth space, but we have a rather large bed that takes up most of this bedroom, and our upstairs is entirely carpeted. So yeah, we just opted for downstairs. Also, we are new-ish to Canada. We've only been here for 5 months. And in South Africa, houses are made with concrete, so they're very, very sturdy. But here we had some fears around setting up a birth pool upstairs and the weight of all of that water, and not knowing that if we place it in a space that wasn't built to take that much weight, whether it would be okay. But then in the same breath, before you come at me saying I'm ridiculous, we had that same fear downstairs. Anyway, so eventually not eventually, like 30 seconds after the conversation started, we decided downstairs is going to be the birthing space for us, and our options downstairs is our lounge or our kitchen. I did not want to be birthing in the kitchen. It did not seem like a nice atmosphere to be birthing in, so I picked the lounge. Specifically, we left a corner of the lounge. We've recently moved into our home, so it was easy to just not furnish that corner just yet. We were going to place a bookshelf there, but because we knew we were preparing for birth, we didn't buy any furniture to put there, and we left our lounge quite bare in terms of furniture. It only at the time of birth had a couch, a chair, a TV, and a TV stand. So to be honest, we did like right up until the end wonder if the floor would be able to take the weight of the birth pool when it was filled. So we did read the instructions to see how heavy it gets and kind of Googled, can the average Canadian floor take this amount of weight? But in the end, we did feel comfortable because we kind of equated it to if you're going to have a really large appliance on your floor, like if you have a fridge, like a really big fridge, then that would be similar-ish weight to the birth pool when it's full. Hi. Okay, so given that we picked our lounge does not have a water supply. So that was the next consideration, is how are you going to put water into your birthing pool? So we needed to get water either from the kitchen sink or from the downstairs bathroom that is slightly further than the kitchen sink. Hi, baby. In our case, the birth pool renting company supplied a hose, and you had an option to pick one of two lengths of the hose, and we went for the longer one to make sure that it would be able to reach either from the bathroom or from the kitchen. Then another consideration here, and thankfully other people shared this with me, is some homes, your geyser or however you get hot water is not designed to provide a lot of hot water downstairs if there are no bathrooms downstairs. So a friend of mine did share with me that in her case, in her birthing experience, they ran out of hot water for the birthing pool because they'd not tested how big their geyser was downstairs in terms of heating the birthing pool. I will cover what we did to mitigate this when I discuss how to keep the birth pool warm. But essentially what I'm trying to point out here is when you decide where in your house to put it, consider the access to water, consider the floor that you have. I mean, obviously you don't intend for water to get everywhere, but it is a birth pool, so that is a possibility. And you also want to consider whether you have access to warm water or a different way to heat up your birth pool. All right, let's move on to discussing the supply and how to keep the water warm. One of the biggest tips that I can share based off of our experience, but also based off of other people who've shared their experience with me and various birth videos that I watched, is check the adapter that goes from your tap, like from your faucet, to the hose that is going to be used to fill up your pool. We did not test this until quite close to, I think, 40 weeks. And we discovered, even though the renting company gave us two different ones that she said would fit most taps, it did not fit our kitchen tap, and it did not fit our downstairs bathroom one either. So my husband went to Home Depot to try and find a solution to this, and they didn't have a solution. So we ended up going to a plumbing shop and ended up getting, I think it was 4 different attachments, or 2 to 4 different things that were attached together to make it work. I know that this has happened to quite a lot of people, and they end up on the day filling up their birth pool with buckets. And that just seems unnecessarily like a task to do when you're, focusing on giving birth and wanting to potentially focus on other things. So a big tip is, probably one of the main things to test is whether your hose fits the water supply, and then to get a adapter or whatever you need to make it fit. In terms of water supply, this is just a fun little side story, is my husband decided that he wanted to install a water filter system onto our mains, as well as a water softener around the time that I was 40 weeks pregnant. And I had such concerns because typically in South Africa, it's very common to hire people to do the home tasks for you, get a plumber in, get an electrician in, get a handyman in, and you don't end up doing a lot of that stuff yourself. But my husband decided he was going to do this himself, and I definitely believed in his skill set and his thoroughness, but it terrified me that he was going to cut our main water lines at a time where I could go into labor at any point. Anyway, he was extra cautious and made backup contingent plans to ensure that, even if something didn't go perfectly with that installation, I would still have water if necessary. Thankfully, all went fine with that installation, and I was grateful because that meant that for our birth, we did have softer water, and our water then had a filter. All right, then the next and I guess final consideration of water supply is I would recommend assigning somebody in your birth space who is going to focus on the birth pool, so that the person knows, okay, they need to think about when to fill it, they know where all the things are for the birth pool, and then they also know to be the person to check that the water temperature is nice and right for when you want to use your birth pool. In our case, it was my husband Ian who filled the birth pool, and it was my husband Ian who monitored the temperature of the birth pool. And he only did that when our doula was with me. So that's also one of the reasons that we got a doula, is there's some practical things in birth that we wanted, and we knew that we kind of want more hands to be able to do those things. And it worked out really well for the doula to be with me and for him to then go and focus on filling up the birth pool and checking the temperature and all that. So now, how did we keep it warm? So the first thing is our birth pool, the kit, came with a water thermometer. The water thermometer is lying here somewhere. You don't return the things that was in the water for obvious reasons. So that was quite nice to not have to feel it and guess whether it is the appropriate temperature or not, to just have a thermometer floating in the pool. So if your rented pool does not come, or if you purchased the pool does not come, or if you used your bathtub does not come with a thermometer, I think it is helpful to have a water thermometer just to check the temperature of the water. So the first way that we kept the water warm or made the water warm was to use the hot water out of the tap to fill the birth pool. But also I had numerous people tell me that they had frustrations keeping their birth pool warm enough because labor can take really long and you don't know how long you're going to be keeping that water warm for. And the idea of letting water out, letting more water in, letting water out, letting more water in just did not seem appealing. Thankfully, I have a connection and a friend who has done this 3 times, and based off of her experience, she recommended a water heater that she had used for her birth a few months before ours. I intended to show you it in this video, but I'm not going to disturb Elba to go fetch it now, so I will just insert a picture of it here. It worked really well to just maintain the temperature. And I actually think we used it to heat up the pool more after using the hot water from the tap. And then it pretty much, I think, remained in the pool the whole time to keep it warm, or it went in and out. I was a little busy not paying attention to that part. But my husband Ian did report that it was useful and worth the money that we spent on it. Initially, when this friend said, oh, you can get a water heater, I was like, no, I'm not paying for a water heater. But they aren't as expensive as I had in my mind. So I will link down below the one that we got. This is the same one that she used. So this is at least 2 people who are saying this worked well for their birthing space. And I wanted warm water. I definitely did not want to get into cold-ish I guess it's still lukewarm water, but yeah, it was important to me to not have that whole take water out, add water thing, and to not have the risk of there being potentially cold water if we didn't have enough hot water downstairs. Because we did not test the birth pool before the time. We tested it just to make sure that the hose can attach and water can get to it, and it didn't seem like it had any leaks, but we didn't actually fill it up before the time. All right, now on to some more practical elements of doing a home birth. One of the important things is, of course, to protect the space. So what is going to be under your birth pool? In our case, we did it downstairs. The floor, it looks like it's wood, but it's not wood. I think it's like some kind of vinyl covering or something, but definitely something that is susceptible to water damage and would not have looked good if there was a lot of water that went on it. Thankfully, again, part of renting the pool, we got a tarp. So we got the thing that went under the birth pool, and that went back with the birth pool when we were done with it. So we laid that down as a protection. When we had sessions with the doula before, because we'd never done a birth, this was our first birth, we'd never done a home birth, we'd never done a water birth. So we did discuss with both the doula and the midwife certain practical things that they'd experienced. So we asked them, like, should we put down more tarps, like over the rug that we have in our lounge? Should we put down towels? Like, what should we do? And they made a very valid point that putting down additional tarps or towels on the floor where you're not actually using said towel is a bit of a tripping hazard. So we ended up not putting down any additional tarps other than the one that came with the birth pool. And we had a basket of a lot of towels. I'll get to that in a moment, but we only used the towels and absorbent pads and that kind of stuff if and when necessary. It wasn't like laying out all over the floor protecting the rug. Both the midwife and the doula reassured us that although birth can get messy, you can get all of the stuff out. You can get it out of your rug and you can get it out of the things. And in our case, when I tell my birth story, it did come out of everything in our house. We do not have anything that has any kind of stains or any damage from our birth. So with birth, obviously it can be beautifully messy, and the recommendation for me, I think, was to get 6 towels. What we ended up doing is, again, we're new in a country, so usually someone will just have old towels in their house that they would use for their birth. But we did not have that. We just had nice new towels that we didn't want to use. So we went to the thrift store and I picked out 6 towels that were made of stuff that I'm comfortable to use, and they felt nice and looked nice and all of that. We got that at the thrift store and washed that, and that was our 6 towels that would be used for me and for baby. Then we also got 2 bags. We first started with just 1 bag, but then we went back and got another one. There's a thrift store that sells bags of old towels that can just be used to clean up mess or whatever. There are various sizes, from a normal bath towel size to a floor towel to a hand towel, etc. So we bought 2 of those, and honestly, very, very good buy. They were, I think, $4 each for a bag of 10 towels. They have been used so much in the birth and thereafter. So I would highly recommend, if you do have a thrift store near you that does that, that is a great option if you do not have old towels in your house. Okay, next practical thing is, when do you blow up your pool, and do you leave it blown up? Do you blow it up on the day? I think people who've done maybe more than 1 birth might opt to just blow it up on the day, but we didn't know how fast labor would be. We didn't know, I mean, they give you an estimate of how long it takes to blow up the pool, I think, and to fill it up, but we felt that it was best to just blow it up before the time. But a consideration here, so I think some people would already blow it up from like 37 weeks. At 37 weeks, I really didn't feel like baby was gonna come. So I think we only actually set it up around just shy of 40 weeks. We even had a housewarming baby shower at 39 weeks, so I didn't have it set up there after the people left and after we'd hosted our last social thing. Then I felt like, okay, we can blow up the pool now. The pool then stayed blown up in our lounge. But one consideration is, if you do have children or pets, you might want to consider whether you can protect the birth pool if it's going to be blown up. In our case, we have 2 cats. If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure we clipped their nails prior to setting up the birth pool just in case, but I mean, they don't typically scratch something like that, but we did watch them to see, and only twice my cat attempted to get into the birth. There are instructions with how to blow it up, and it does come with a pump when you rent it. So we didn't have any struggles to blow it up. In our case, which was also really nice, is the birth pool comes with a liner that is made for it. So it's not just a birth liner, it's a liner for this specific pool. So it's got kind of where the handles for this pool are, whether it's like a cup holder for this pool, and it fit the pool perfect. So that was really nice, and that came with the birth pool. Of course, as you can imagine, you do not return the liner part. That one stays with you. You do, however, return the pump that you use to blow up the pool. Okay, so what else did we get? So we got the thermometer came with a rented pool, and a nice little touch that I did not think of, but if in future I rent a pool that doesn't come with this is something that I would then opt to get myself, is our rented birth pool came with these cute little water tea lights that you kind of drop at the bottom of the pool. They use batteries to function, and firstly they create like quite a nice look to the birth pool, but secondly the person that we rented the birth pool from said that it can be helpful in terms of monitoring for the midwife. Then of course we got all the towels that we got, and we got some fairy lights to put behind the pool to make it a nice atmosphere. In terms of what I wore, I just wore whatever bra was comfortable, and I was fine with it getting wet, and it dried easily. But to be honest, I didn't really think about that. But a few people did say to me, like, give some consideration to the bra that you'd want to be wearing. If you want to be wearing a bra, obviously you don't have to wear a bra in your birthing experience. And if you're going to do a water birth, then just consider that it is most likely going to get wet depending on how you position yourself. It's not that the water is up to here. It's just in my case, it was how I moved around. It definitely did get wet. Right, other thing I intended to show you, but again, I'm not going to go fetch it now, is that there's a strong recommendation, and it was on our list as well from the midwives for a home birth, if you are using a pool, is to get a sieve. And funnily enough, when I pictured this, I pictured like a kitchen sieve, like those metal ones that you use in the kitchen. But when we rented our birth pool, they gave us a sieve with it, and it's like a cute little kiddie fishing sieve. So I was like, oh right, that makes way more sense than getting like a fancy kitchen sieve for the purpose that you use it for. If you're very new to the birthing experience and you're wondering why a sieve, it is because you can imagine biologically with baby coming down the birth canal, there's a lot of pressure onto your bowels. So there's a high likelihood that if there's anything in there, it is going to come out at some point during your birthing experience. And you might want to be able to take it out the pool with something like a sieve. All right, and now that we're on the topic of birthing your baby, so in our case, we had a midwife, and then when the baby is coming, they call for a backup midwife to have a midwife for baby. So what I thought was really nice is we did read the instructions of what to do, you know, after baby's here and you want to now take the pool down. One of my husband's big questions was, how do we get the water out? And thankfully, other people think about all this stuff. So part of our rented birth pool was another pump that you use to pump out the water. But what was cool, and why I told you the story about the backup midwife, is at some point during, so Elba was born at 2:15 in the morning, and they stayed and they do your checks and they stay and do paperwork and all that. At some point when we were very much settled and they'd done a lot of the checks, the backup midwife, who clearly is very familiar with birthing pools, immediately was like, where's the pump? And she put that in the pool to ensure that we could get the water out and make it convenient for us. And that was just really nice to see that she had very clearly done this a few times. So the pump to let the water out goes straight into the water, and they recommended to us to put it with that same hose that you use to fill up the pool to the toilet, and then you can close the toilet lid and you don't have to sit there necessarily supervising it, but you do have to supervise the water level to make sure that it doesn't go too far below the pump and damage the pump. Luckily, I was lying on the couch, or not luckily, but I was lying on the couch with Elba watching it so I could let my husband know when it was time to turn off the pump. Once you've pumped out the water, I was not present for this part, my husband did this. The instruction was to then just take the liner as is and to throw it out, and then to dry the rest of the pool, and once it is fully dry to then deflate the pool, fold it, and let them know that they could pick it up to be returned. Alright, I'm just trying to think if I missed anything, but I don't think I did. Those were kind of all the things that I wondered about when we were preparing. As you can see, renting a birth pool worked out really well for us in terms of getting all of the little supplies, and then in future, if I rent from a company, if for whatever reason we're not in Calgary or I can't rent from the same company again, because I'd more than happily use them again, is that I have some tips on what I would like to get. So for example, the thermometer and a kitty sieve instead of, like in my mind, a fancy sieve, and I think that the little water lights seem to be a very cute idea. I guess just to add, we did prepare for a water birth and we did use the water during birth, but Elba was not actually born in the water. So that is a story for another day, and I will share my birth story. You're welcome to, in the comments below, pop any questions that you have around preparing for a water birth as much as I can. I am happy to try to answer them, or anybody else watching this video might have some experience and they'd be able to answer any questions that was not covered in this video. If you are preparing for a water birth, I'm wishing you the most fun in your preparations. I'm wishing you a beautiful rest of your pregnancy, and also wishing you an amazing, very meaningful birthing experience. If you like this video, please remember to like this video, and if you'd like to see more of my videos, and if you are interested in the videos that I'm going to make around my birthing experience and other things around birth, please remember to subscribe to my channel.